Well, thank you for staying with Daybreak. Let's start off that conversation. We're calling it the state of agriculture. What is ailing the agricultural sector? What interventions are there? And which role can you play as well? At Trevor Mbija at Citizen TV Kenya, use the hashtag Daybreak. Let me introduce my guest real quick. Honorable Ann Nyaga is already here, the Chief Administrative Secretary, Ministry of Agriculture. We're still waiting for Stephen Mushiri, is the CEO, East African Farmers Federation. He'll be joining us online as soon as he does. We'll rope him into the discussion. But Honorable Nyaga, before we get into your uniform, what do you think is ailing the agricultural sector in your view? You've been there for a while now.
Thank you, Trevor. Thank you for having me on this show. First and foremost, let me say that agriculture, the agricultural sector, has been facing, of course, many challenges, and issues of low production, issues of limited capacity amongst our farmers, issues of markets, capital access, issues of climate change, and also the risks that are involved in the sector at large are some of the issues that have been ailing the sector. And not only from a perspective of challenges, because what government policies and strategies are supposed to do is, look at these critical challenges and also find a way of addressing these challenges. So we have challenges, fine, but we have been having very deliberate efforts, policies, strategies that are then geared towards addressing these particular challenges.
Yeah.
We have designed programs and which are being implemented in all the counties, because now, agriculture is a devolved function.
Yeah.
So we have programs. You'll find that each county, on the very least, each county will have about 2 programs on the very least that are actually intervening on issue of capital access, issues of capacity, issues of also productivity. Let me just highlight 2 programs, actually 3 programs that are running across the country. Amongst the over 20 programs that we are running, of course, across all the state departments, because we have 4 state departments. We have a program called ASDSP2, and ASDSP2 by design is in 47 counties. And what ASDSP2 does is the issue of capacity. Of course, we have highlighted between 3 to 4 value chains, depending on the county of choice and also the request that was coming from the counties. So from these value chains, say maybe a county has chosen the dairy value chain, poultry, and maybe a crop, say, say maybe a county has chosen something like legumes or cereals. So what we do is we highlight that whole crop in terms of the value chain. We build the capacity along the various nodes that are there in that particular value chain. So again, we not only build the capacity, but also we also intervene in terms of the financial support, which we lump the support in terms of grants. That is just how the ASDSP2 is designed. We also have a program called KSAP. KSAP is in 24 counties, and we also have a sister program to KSAP, which is called NARIG. NARIG is in 21 counties. And these programs, they address the issue of production, low productivity, issues of capacity, and also issues of access to finance, and also issues of market access, so that we can be able to see how do we then address to these challenges which are ailing the sector, but through program design. Okay. So we'll have these programs which actually we are implementing in collaboration with the county governments, because with the in the wake of devolution, we talk about collaborating and also, consulting amongst each other. So we have all these programs that have been designed, and the people who actually spearhead the implementation at the county level, we channel this support through the county executive committee members, popularly known as CECs, or county ministers. And we build the capacity of the county ministers for them to understand how a program has been designed. And then also we use the whole structure of the county government, from the chief officer to the director level up to the sub-county and ward agricultural officers. Of course, the way we have designed these programs, we have coordinating units, which are then given the overall mandate for the implementation of these programs. But then the implementation is done at the county level. What we do at the national level is thoroughly build the capacity of the counties to understand the program design, Then we offload the trainings to them.
Yeah.
Then the trainings are also followed with the financing.
Okay.
So that they can then be able to unload the same capacity to the farmers, and also the money to the farmers, because we build the capacity and also give them financing.
Yeah.
And from the structure, in terms of how they have been structured, because in every county we've targeted 600 groups for them to be able to form, with a minimum membership of about 30 people per group. Of course, these groups are drawn from the women, from youth, from men. We're talking about being all inclusive.
Yeah.
And we build their capacity, and then we onward the finances to them through the community banks that we guided them to form, because by the time we were doing the program design, we also developed guidelines on how the finances should be handled. So all this support has been sent to the counties. Different programs have been designed to be able to address different challenges.
Okay, let me bring in Stephen on this. Mushiri, from your perspective, what is ailing the agricultural sector?
Yes, good morning. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, you're clear.
Yes. There are many challenges that agriculture has been facing in this country, and I think some of them have been probably highlighted. You know, I think for the longest time, we've been having a challenge of cost of credit for the farmer, access to finance and affordability of it. Of course, we've been going through the challenges of climate change, pest and disease. We still have issues of market access. And I think for me, the biggest challenge that has been affecting productivity has been organization of value chains. I think slowly we were trying to get there, but I think for the last 1.5 years, the COVID pandemic seems to have almost eroded this. And I think it's really taken us back to, you know, a couple of steps back. And I know there are programs around what you call building forward better to try and see how we can actually manage and get back to where we were back then. But there's an additional challenge, which I think we always scatter around. And this has been the rise or the introduction of new taxes in agriculture. I think we've done work around monitoring budget allocation. And I think every year for the last, for about 5 years that we did that, there was always an additional tax in agriculture, to the extent that either it's direct, a tax that is hitting agriculture directly or indirectly, such that the country then becomes, or production becomes then too high, or we become uncompetitive with respect to, you know, especially the low, what you call the lower value chains. You can actually see we import a lot from our neighbors. And when you visit or when you talk to you know, Uganda and Tanzania, you can actually see the cost of production is actually quite low compared to us. So I think the biggest elephant in the room has been taxation, and I think it's important that we actually have a discussion, you know, in terms of how are we actually going to address the issue of incentivizing not only farmers but also other players who are actually in agriculture. Because when you look at the unpredictability of the taxes in this country, it becomes very difficult for someone to put in a long-term investment, because tomorrow they don't know what is going to actually happen to the tax issues, yeah, in this country, yeah. So I think it's a challenge. It's a challenge that I don't know how it can actually be addressed, because I think the political class, you know, should actually try and address this issue. Otherwise, you know, as we proceed, you know, the next couple of years, it's going to be quite challenging to be able to invest in agriculture in this country. I think there has been even discussions, I think at some point by the CS, that we need to get out of smallholder farming. We need to focus on large-scale farming. You know, I don't think that is that should be actually the direction of handling agriculture. I think there's still so much, you know, in terms of engaging smallholder farmers into business units. You know, if the tax environment is actually conducive.
Okay.
I know we've been doing a lot of work around policies. I think that was going to be one of the discussion, and I've heard the presenter talk about policies. But Trevor, if we try and look through so many months you've been discussing this topic, every time we're discussing policy, every time we're discussing a policy reform, there seems to be some kind of timeline as to when we discuss issues of strategy, policy, and institutional reform. We really need to have some kind of timeline, because for Kenya to develop, there's a sum of all these parts that has to be moving in one direction. Otherwise, we'll be always stuck with one subsector discussing. For example, today we're discussing tea policies around or reforms around tea. Tomorrow we are on coffee. The next day we are on coconut. Sometimes you tend to feel that we are stuck in these discussions on policy, and we are actually not moving. And you know what policy is supposed to do? Policy is supposed to attract investments. Yeah, policy is supposed to bring in investments into the country. Yeah, but when you look at the policy discussions, as it were, you sometimes have a challenge around the consultation process. Yeah. Who is actually pushing this policy? Is it the farmers? Is it some cartels? Is it the government? And if, as it were, these policies are actually being put in place, are they pro-business? Are they pro-farmer? Are they trying to address the issue of self-reliance, food security? We always talk about value addition, but where do you actually see this in policy, and how is this actually been addressed? We now have COVID. We've been having so many shocks in agriculture, but how do we address the issue of safety nets? Yeah, because the person who is actually affected most in this is actually a farmer. But when you look at how we manage this kind of risk, it's not usually very well managed. These issues of subsidy and so on. So we never actually get out of these issues, and we always end up importing. Okay. And when we import, it affects almost 2 seasons, such that by the time you're trying to recover, then there's another importation. It's interesting. I had a discussion, I think, yesterday, where we were talking about, for the last 1 year, there's been no importation. Well, thank God, we've not had any importation, because the fear usually is that whenever we start approaching an election year, that's when these gates are actually opened up. And we get product coming, it floods, and it affects the sector. And like I was mentioning earlier, I think the biggest disservice has been our political class in terms of addressing agriculture. I think we're in such a deep pit right now, Trevor, that if we actually need to really focus on who are the key drivers, who are the key enablers to bring us back or build back agriculture to where it's supposed to be. And if it means we have some reliefs, for example, if it's in doing business, or reliefs in terms of even bringing technology, then we actually need to do that. We need to focus in terms of how we manage our risks and how we manage the responses. Because like I said earlier, the safety nets, the way they are designed, they're not managed well. Okay. We need to plan to significantly reduce imports. Tanzania stopped importing rice. I don't know why we don't import rice from Tanzania. I don't know why we don't grow wheat in our neighborhood. We are importing wheat from Eastern Europe. We're even importing milk from the Pacific. I think we really need to think about our import substitution plan, because then therein lies the opportunity to be able to actually to manage our risk of food security. Okay. And the last thing I want to talk about is institutions, and I think the earlier speaker talked about it. I don't want to talk about the capacity of government, but I think the biggest challenge we have at the moment is that most of the value chains are broken. If you remember, I talked about what we call the lower value chains, the maize, the beans, where the bulk of the farmers are. These need heavy lifting when it comes to support by government. We need to build what we call ecosystems of partnerships along different value chains, because if you're going to address the issue of capacity, just handling information asymmetry alone is enhancing capacity. I can tell you that for free. For example, we visited Canada at some point, and we were discussing, I think, the pork value chain. And they told us they all meet, all the actors, from the farmers to the processors to the logistics, the supermarkets, to discuss production, how much we are short for the year, how much you expect to import in the year. So you actually manage how much you actually bring in, because Canada, for example, risks being flooded by products from the US. So there has to be some kind of protectionism, and that protectionism has to come from organizing, value chains and the actors along those value chains, so that you actually clear about information. There's information flow.
Yeah.
We know the market needs, and we actually see whether we have the capacity. And the last one, which I think was not properly addressed, is the issue of at the farmer level. I know there are discussions here and there about cooperatives and how they're managed and so forth, but I think there are very good lessons you can learn from Europe, you can learn from Asia. I mean, we deal with Rabobank in Kenya now. Rabobank is a cooperative. You know, why aren't we seeing the important role that cooperatives can actually bring on board as far as agriculture development is concerned? And I think the important lesson here in those countries has been that government actually played a huge role in ensuring that they nurture cooperatives. In Kenya, government fears cooperatives. They fear cooperatives will be too strong and, you know, there will be a challenge. But I think for me, if we don't address this issue of cooperatives, because cooperatives, they do what you call aggregation business.
Yeah.
And address the issue of farmer registration. And I think for me, depending on how they actually build up, you know, we'll address all these issues of value addition, logistics, finance, whatever it is. And for me, they will actually be a better actor to deal with, you know, in a round table, trying to discuss with other actors.
Okay.
But if I could add one more,
maybe, I'll come to you for that in just a bit, Mushiri.
Yes, sorry?
I'll come to you for that in just a bit, yeah.
Maybe just the last one.
Okay.
The issue of embracing intra-Africa trade. I think in addition to what we have achieved in as far as export trade is concerned, our view is that supporting local agribusinesses to export within Africa and to source raw material from within Africa, for us is the most sustainable way to grow our agriculture. Why? Because we are part and parcel of actually stakeholders in the different regional economic communities. I talk different regional economic communities. And in these economic communities, we have predictability in as far as the business environment is concerned, in as far as the tax regimes are concerned.
Okay.
When we start importing from outside of Africa, you know, we're always hit by, for example, changes in the EU tax system, standard system. You know, we now have, with COVID, you've learned what you call food nationalism. You know, food was not coming into this region. So imagine how it can actually be if we had a similar pandemic a couple of years ahead. So we really need to think about this. Okay. In a broader way, and let's not think of it in a very pedestrian way. We need to think about this in a long-term manner. You know, what actually needs to be built, what institutions needs to be in place. Otherwise, some of the pedestrian, policies that we actually put in place, if they're not followed through and there's proper investment around that, then we'll be having these discussions every time. Thank you.
All right. Yes, there's a lot of issues that have been raised there, but one of them, the biggest one, is taxation and policy. What is your response to this?
I think, let me thank Mushiri for highlighting some of the issues that, from a federation perspective, he feels that are burning. But let me say that by the time we are developing a policy, the government does not just wake up and start developing policies. We start with the processes of consultations, of course, with the farmers, with the counties. By the time we are deciding this is the policy direction or this is the policy that we are presenting, it has passed through a comprehensive consultation mechanisms. So we just don't wake up and develop a policy without the consultation, which is also spearheaded at the county level by the county governments. By the time a policy is developed, and that is then the critical aspect that the government needs then to respond to, we of course put various aspects into place to be able to ensure that we just don't develop policies which we just put in shells. And again, once you see a policy is developed by government, then programs are then designed to be able to facilitate the implementation of this policy. I'll give an example of our priority right now being the food and nutrition pillar. All these programs that we have designed, whether they cut across the State Department of Cooperatives, crops, livestock, or crop development. These programs have been designed in such a manner. Once we develop the strategic policy direction, then budgets follow through then program design so that we can be able to edge or address a specific challenge in a specific manner. So in terms of policy and strategies, maybe for purposes of maybe Mushiri and also the team that he may be working with and also any other viewer, is we develop policy, then specific programs are then designed to be able to address this. Then the issue of cooperatives. by design, and I may want to encourage that since this information has been disseminated up to the ward level, the sub-county level, and also forming various coordinating units at all the 47 counties. So such that if in terms of these 600 groups that we are forming at the county levels, 600 groups in each and every county. So if you say 600 groups, of course, minimum 300 membership per group, times 46 counties, because Nairobi we treat it a bit differently. So times 46, you can be able to look at the numbers of how many farmers are amalgamating along specific value chains. So in those, the way we've designed them is only that you're calling them silently, these are already cooperatives, because what the farmers are doing, we are dealing with the issue of production. We still give them financing through these formations. And then again, we have also formed the structures where we call them producer organizations. These producer organizations are then supposed to be fed by these groups that we form at the county level. So this we form in every county, the 600 we form the groups, the farmer groups, and then they amalgamate into a producer organization. And remember, we are making investments at every critical level. At the production level where these farmers are convening, we have made investments. And again, these investments, we are channeling them through the specific farmer groups. Again, at the producer level, again, being very guided by the value chains of choice of those counties, we then make investments at the producer, at the union level, what I may call a union, but we call them producer organizations, where they amalgamate to be able to form a union. So all these structures have been formed. Of course, these programs, they have a lifespan because, again, the next programs that we design will be handling something that we feel needs to be handled as per the policy and the strategic guidance. But for now, those are how those structures have been defined. And what we have been encouraging the county governments is do not dismantle these structures, because we've taken a lot of capacity, a lot of effort in terms of the financing to be able to put these structures in place. And we are saying these are good models that can be adopted to be able to address any other specific challenges that the counties may feel or any farmer groups may feel that may need to be addressed. So again, these are structures and these are programs that are very well known to the farmer. If you went to a farmer, for instance, in a county like Migori, this farmer will explain the kind of a program that is in that specific county. So again, also encouraging people to go up to the ward level, the sub-county level, because structures have been built and capacity built of these officers to be able to guide the farmers. So in terms of making the market linkages, we also, a couple of months ago, the Ministry of Trade advertised or gave us information about some markets for broccoli and also bananas. Again, once that has been done, also having our farmers also come on board, or other federations or other groupings that may want to have that in a kind of a linkage to be able to access these markets. This is something that the ministry is, the two ministries actually are able to, support the farmers to be able to assist them to be able to get, these market linkages. So again, coming forth, and I'm happy that Mushiri is highlighting some of these issues because again, it's an issue of now knowing exactly where the challenge is and seeing how we can be able to facilitate. So I think maybe moving forward, or maybe after this session, Mushiri, we can have a discussion and see, should you be having a federation of farmers that is in search for market? Because these interventions are there. It is an issue of getting you and the groupings to know exactly what is happening and make the interlink, because that is what government is supposed to be doing and will be willing to be able to facilitate. Yeah,
because Mushiri also spoke about the safety nets for farmers during this COVID-19 period. Are there any specific interventions?
By program, the program design, anytime we are developing our programs, like the 5-year programs that we have been developing, we develop them with an aspect of safety nets. So in terms of capacity and also in terms of the grants, the only thing we can do is say maybe we are going to increase the program period, because we always have the media review program, I mean the mid review in terms of how the program we may want to address it in one way or another. But in terms of the safety nets, if say in terms of maybe the farmers may say in the wake of COVID, the way you have structured this program, maybe you want you to consider maybe adding more finances, or even be able to give, maybe seeds, which is already there, maybe increase the quantities and things, and interventions such as that. But in terms of how we have always designed our programs, we've always put in the safety net aspect. So the only thing we can maybe say in this case, because already the safety nets are already there in terms of how we have designed the programs, is maybe say then, maybe there's a request for us to increase the programming, the program period, so that we can be able to have the farmers having maybe an extra 1 year of, the intervention based on whether it's in the fisheries line, whether it's in the livestock line or the crops line. Yeah. So in terms of how we have always designed, there's nothing we can say we are starting to introduce something, because all these aspects from the very program design, because we do it in such a consultative manner, we have always put in the risk. And if someone can go up to the county level, and I want to encourage Mushiri to go up to the county level and see how these structures have been done and what the kind of support these farmers are receiving, then it can be able to give, a clear indication of how the interventions are being done. But again, from consultations, we are also able to change several aspects of the programming. Again, it has to come from the farmers for us to be able to change the programming. Okay.
Mushiri, are the farmers organized enough or even proactive enough to go and seek out these opportunities at the county level, just basically? Because if the opportunities are there and they're not taking advantage of them, how then do you blame a certain institution for not putting them up there on availability?
In Kenya, we have two organizations. You have the Cooperative Alliance of Kenya, which has structures all the way to the county. They are primary cooperatives. And you have the Kenya National Farmers Federation, which now even has county associations. So those institutions are actually there. I think the challenge that we actually have, and I was really listening because I was listening to, how do I call it? I think the challenge we actually have at the county level, if I look at, for example, the last 2 terms of devolution, in the last term, there was actually a challenge of financing. Agriculture is decentralized now. It's at the county level. And I think the challenge we had was allocation for development support. For agriculture at that level. I think at the county level, because we worked a lot with our members at the county level, budget allocation for agriculture for development was actually very low. I don't think it was more than 3% of the county budgets. This year, I looked at even the current allocation. We're not very clear about how much that will be allocated at the county level. I think yesterday I was in a meeting where they talked about counties now allocating almost 6% for development. So the structures are actually there. The problem is always the engagement and the consultation, Trevor. Because I think for me, when I was listening to how the presentation was being done in terms of engagement with farmers, it's not very clear that there's an engagement with the national associations. It's not very clear that there's engagement with the cooperative movement. It's farmer groups, and that's where usually the problem is, because you see the support by government may not be wholly sufficient, and these groups will need to be supported in some form or in some way. An example: there are these opportunities that have actually been raised about bananas and avocados and broccoli, and we actually saw. But the challenge was that institutions were not organized enough to be able to take advantage of those particular opportunities. That I can say without batting an eyelid. And that's why I was talking about government's role in ensuring that we have what you call ecosystem of partnerships along, for example, the avocado value chain, the banana value chain, so that when these opportunities actually come through, then the farmers are not running helter-skelter, trying to meet a demand by Korea, which is not one time, it's not a spot procurement, it's actually a contractual kind of an arrangement. Yeah. So there's actually consistency in terms of supply and delivery. Trevor, I want to give the example of poultry, and this we worked with our poultry association. There was this notion that there's a lot of chicken in Western. And they actually went and set up a factory in Western Kenya. And I can tell you, it didn't even last a month. There was no supply, okay? Simply because the organization of the value chain, like I say, the value chains are actually broken. You know, we have everyone working in silos. There's no information flow. We're not able then to deal with such kind of opportunities. We're not able then to come as a block and address taxation issues or production issues with government. You know, everybody is coming to deal with government, you know, individually. And that is, unfortunately, the tragedy of agriculture. When you look at export, it's more organized. And as I talked about, how do we deal with the low value chains? Anytime there's a demand for beans, you know, the supply is 1 month, 2 months, and there's none. But there's beans all over. And there's a time we were even throwing away cabbages and vegetables in Nyandarua when there's actually a demand in another part of the country. So I think the thing is this, we actually need to address the issue of organization of the value chain. We need to address the issue of strengthening of institutions like farm organizations and cooperatives to be able to take advantage of these opportunities. Even issues of access to finance. Cost of finance is, I mean, it's very expensive. You know, when you look at how farmers are actually assessed in terms of risk, you know, they assess the same way as any other business. Yet, you know, the space that they actually operate in is such a unique space that they're actually vulnerable to so many risks. And that issue of finance has never been fully dealt with. There have been interventions, but they've never been totally followed through. That's why cost is still quite high. Big banks are still shying away from financing agriculture. I talked earlier about improvements that we are actually seeing. At some point, we had actually even been able to engage banks to offer collateral-free loans. They had actually started that process. But now with COVID, that has now actually been eroded. And agriculture has now been thrown back to being viewed as very risky. Of course, you know, banks have now revisited the moratorium around the loans. And the loans have now actually almost again stopped. Yeah. So we really need to have, like I said, a more longer-term objective way in addressing the issues of agriculture. It's not just short-term access to loans. It has to be, you know, properly structured long-term process of loan access. We have signed, for example, an MOU with the Agriculture Finance Corporation. And one of the things we actually want to do is to build the capacity of these cooperatives to be able to meet the requirements of AFC in as far as accessing loans is concerned. Because we feel if these institutions are able to borrow at an institutional level, then they're able to lend to the farmer at a competitive level compared to you know, commercial loans. And that will probably, we may actually start seeing, you know, some movement in terms of expansion of area planted, diversification, you know, value addition, and so forth. So my issue, Trevor, is this: you know, we need to think about these things in a long-term manner. It wasn't very clear from the presenter, you know, in terms of how we're addressing long-term issues. We know there are challenges at the county level, in as far as budgets to agriculture are concerned. Budgets with respect to development are concerned. There are issues at the county level in terms of capacity. You know, when you visit the county levels, look at the capacity of some of those officers. There are challenges, and I think it's important to address them. So there are challenges there in as far as that is concerned. And then, of course, I've talked about the organization of these value chains. If counties then operate as silos and not operate together, you know, say, for example, if it's one value chain and we are connecting, you know, and combining several counties, we will still be in the same problem we're actually in. You know, we have to view this thing in a bigger way, not as a county, but as a country. Yeah. So if we don't address this from a bigger perspective, those are actually my fears. You know, fine, we need to build the foundations, but we need to look at the bigger picture and what is actually being put in place as solid proposals by government to address the issue of food security in this country with finality. That is the issue that I actually have, Trevor.
All right. Cass, the organization of the value chain, low value chain organization is where the main concern is here.
Let me first and foremost just answer what Mushiri has brought forward about the issue of you know, sustaining markets. You know, as I mentioned, you can't sustain something that you're not producing. So that's why our key investments have been towards the production. And not only production, but also continuous and consistent production so that we can be able to feed the markets. That's why you've seen investments and also farmer formations have been made at the very grassroots level. giving them the financing that they need to be able to help in the production aspect, and then amalgamating them for purposes of the volumes. Then once they amalgamate at this particular point, I think the entry point for maybe Mushiri and the Federation would be if you're able to make an interlink from the county-specific producer organization levels. Again, being very specific on the value chain of choice, you can be able to get a lot of produce or a lot of commodities from these formations because the formations are already there. Or maybe take upon the challenge and say, maybe as a federation, this is something that we are willing to spearhead, because the issue of market linkages is something that, and also market facilitation and unlocking the markets and seeing that the farmers are even earning better, is not a one person or one entity discussion. It is something that is collaborative, and we're actually willing to facilitate that, but there needs to come, there's a need to, be very straightforward and say this is the kind of an interest that we have, and then how do we make us or facilitate the linkages, because we have the data. We know who, where, in which county is producing what. What are these farmer groups producing? Are they doing cereals? Are they doing sorghum or millet? Whichever commodity there is, we have that data from our statistics unit. And then we can make a linkage and then find a space where you can be able to support these farmers, because they've already formed those structures already there. And they are producing, they have the volume. So again, how does then the federation then complement the efforts of the farmers, and maybe from the cooperative kind of a setup, how do you then offload or offtake these the particular commodities? And of course, being able to get the financing, I'm happy to hear that there's already an engagement with AFC. Again, that is another arm of government where we are trying to also give farmers financing. In terms of how our financing is structured, because we also have to be able to ensure that we have the small-scale farmer being taken care of, and also the large-scale farmer and other farmers who have the means. We have designed in such a way that we also have grants, because we are aware that not all the farmers can be able to afford to even take a loan. So we have the grant option, which is actually accessible in all the 45 counties as we speak, through the 600 group formations. And I may want to encourage Mushiri to just maybe take a keen interest in those formations, because that is where currently most of the finances in terms of the programming, so far from the program perspective alone, without the budget allocations from the counties, that is how we are structuring those kind of finances at the moment. In terms of loans, again, in June, we launched a program where we are giving up to 5 billion in terms of, we've put in a risk guarantee fund, making up to 5 billion commercially available for youth, young women and young men to be able to borrow at 0%, and also, the 0% facility is different, 0%, 5%, but we also have a risk guarantee fund where they can be able to walk into commercial loans and also take advantage of these particular investments by the government. Again, if you walk into the commercial banks where the government has been able to put in the risk guarantee fund, these are also other options apart from the likes of AFC, where you can be able to get the financing from. We also have other institutions within the Ministry of Trade where you can also be able to get affordable financing from. So I think it's an issue of having consultations, and I think where we may need to also make improvements in terms of the information dissemination, but all these things we have been highlighting them, through the farmer groups, through the county sensitization, and also through our digital platform, because again, we also want to speak to the youth who are largely on the digital platform. So this is information which is out there, and I want to just put an encouragement for you to be able, to your members to also be able to check. In terms of the capacity of the staff, and as I mentioned when I was starting, capacity is actually a major challenge that we have. But continuously, even as we implement programs, regardless of whether they are 5-year programs or 8-year programs, the first thing where we start off is building the capacity of the county government staff, because we want to onward the capacity to them so that they can be able to then retain it and also build the capacity of the farmers. Again, we are doing it in a very structured approach, because again, we have to be very innovative as to how we disseminate information. Remember, we've come from the days where we used to have extension officers, you know, going into various farms. The finances may not be there now to be able to carry out a extension in such a manner where it might be so expensive. But now a very specific or very structured kind of capacity building model has been structured, where we build the capacity of the unit that will be running specific interventions. Then that capacity is then onwarded, the same unit, say it has about 6 to 8 staff who are then dedicated to run a specific program. Then these staff, then they go and build the capacity of the sub-county agricultural officers and the ward agricultural officers. Again, the capacity, as I mentioned, is alongside the 3 value chains of choice in a specific county. So then again, we teach them every aspect that they need to know alongside that that particular value chain, from production to financing to helping farmers develop their proposals. Okay. And then that knowledge, the intention is to leave that knowledge with the farmer and also build TOTs. And also coming to that, we also have innovative models, extension models, where we are talking about village-based extension advisors, where we build the capacity, and this one we are working with private sector, build the capacity of various farmer leaders within the communities, and then they onward this kind of you know, education to their fellow farmers, even help them or sell the seeds to them, so that we can be able to have, you know, the issue of productivity being addressed, because we are choosing the right kind of seeds to be able to onward. So the capacity building is there. Only that the way we are doing it is in a very structured manner, and also in a manner that is also able to give us more quick results. And also, again, knowing that we also, because of the budget constraints, being able to, you know, segment, you know, have more results or critical kind of results from very little investments, of course, living within the finances that are available. Okay. I talked about the organization for the counties in terms of the markets. Again, I don't know, maybe Mushiri would highlight whether do you have a challenge in getting into contact with the county governments if you have something that you feel you're able to offer as a federation, because that is something we can facilitate. But also the specific ask needs to come out quite clearly, so that we can be able to see how do we then support you, so that you can also be able to offer value for the farmers and for these organizations.
All right. Mushiri, I have to take a quick break, but you can respond to that, because agriculture is devolved. Are you having challenges interacting with the counties?
Actually, Trevor, I'd expected a response on the taxation question. I think it hasn't been addressed. I think it's important that my colleague knows that we offer positive criticism when it comes to issues of agriculture. And because we love this country, and we want this country to actually develop in as far as this sector is concerned. We have the benefit of overseeing about 10 countries, and we're able to see what actually happens in those countries. And we are able to compare and reflect back as to whether the same is actually happening in Kenya. Because the responsibility of food security in this country is the responsibility of government. And I think when we pressure government, it's not that we have an issue with it. It's just that we cannot raise issues if there are no concerns. We have concerns in terms of consultation. We have concerns in terms of policy implementation. We have concerns in terms of the institutions that are involved in as far as policy implementation is concerned. We have an issue in terms of accountability by everybody, because on policy, everybody is accountable. Government is accountable. We are accountable as farmers. And we have an issue because of the dwindling investment in agriculture. We have engaged county government. We've not had any issue. We consult or engage county governments through the Council of Governors. The office is actually here in Nairobi. And we're able to go through that office, secretariat, and we're able to reach, you know, any country we actually want to go to. We're able to have an audience even with the governors. So that has not been an issue. But in our engagements, we have observed, you know, some of those challenges that I highlighted. One, the capacity at the county level, the budgeting at the county level, the organization of farmers at that county level into, you know, business kind of orientations. the infrastructural investments at the county level supporting agriculture. We have concerns about some of the policies being passed at the county government level, some of them in contradiction with the national policy, some of them, I mean, for example, we had the potato policy, and you could actually see how it actually raised a lot of questions in terms of who was consulted, you know, how is this thing put together? You know, so those are concerns that need to be raised. Probably are not raised by the farmers at that level, but when we pick them, you know, we're in a position to actually raise them because we actually want to see the country grow. But when you look at the stats, you know, in terms of productivity in this country, you know, there's a concern. You know, our productivity is not headed in the right direction. When you look at organization of the value chains, I said earlier, we compare, for example, with Rwanda, we compare with Ethiopia, and you can actually see the role that government actually plays in holding everybody to account, including development partners, such that at the end of a fiscal year, you know, everybody is actually reporting on what they actually planned to do. You know, we have projects run in Rwanda where even at the sub-county level, you know, you have to present these projects to the mayor. You have to present to a committee that is in charge of development in that particular region. And they sum up all these investments that actually happen in their region. And at the end of the fiscal year, you all come and report. You know, what did you achieve? Did you put in the money you talked about? Did you reach the farmers you talked about? Where is the change? Yeah. You know, that level of accountability. And that's the problem that we actually have here. You know, we talk, you know, large and big, but when you go to the ground, you actually realize that, you know, it's islands of this. And I think we need to look at how all these islands are matched. So there's something comprehensive and something significant to actually drive the sector. So, I mean, there are many issues, Trevor.
Okay.
And I know the government has really tried, you know, it's put in a lot of structures, but we still feel there's still a lot more, and that needs to be done. Because, like I said, we seem to be going ahead, but moving many steps back. And the issue of taxation, I really want to hear about that because it's a concern for us. Like I said, you know, every year there's a tax added.
Yeah.
I think we did the studies, you know, there were almost 6-7 taxes that were actually loaded. And some of them are directly to agriculture. Others are indirectly hitting agriculture, but affecting agriculture. In some places, there's double taxation. I'm happy that there was a discussion by county government to address the issue of cess, you know, cess alone.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's crazy, Trevor. And that's why I was saying, you know, are these policies pro-business? You know, if you are running a business, Trevor, and you want to benefit the country. You see, I talked about the issue of working as counties as compared to working as countries. And you can see just the issue of sales alone. We're already working in silos. It's becoming so expensive to be able to access markets simply because I'm moving from, for example, from Kisumu and I'm coming all the way. And maybe I'm advertising my product and I have to pay all through, you know. So, I mean, we need to really, you know, in as much as we want to focus on policy, but the bigger picture, is it pro-business? Is it going to support development of agriculture? Is it going to enhance self-reliance? Are we actually going to add value? Are we going to safeguard this sector? If we don't address this from outside the box, then we're not going to address the specific policies that are going to support that vision.
Okay.
Those are my concerns, Trevor, and I think they're done in a very positive spirit.
All right. Thanks, Mushiri. That's Stephen Mushiri, CEO, East African Farmers Federation. We're taking a quick break now. When we come back, we're back with Ms. Ann Nyaga, CAS, Ministry of Agriculture, to talk about the 4K clubs. It was launched recently. We want to find out how that will be amalgamated with the CBC and everything else in regards to that. See you in a bit.